Chapter 6. The two returned from their excursion and woke me up from my nap. It was time to redress my wound, and they helped me get it covered and cleaned. I writhed in pain as they took care of the gash. They tried to comfort me as best as they could. After the ordeal, I noticed that Topi was much less dejected over my state and was almost back to herself again. We went to bed early that night. Kazuti slept in my room since she didn't have anywhere else to be that night. Topi apologized one last time for everything that happened that day, but I reassured her that everything was fine. I wished her good night, and she only returned a grunt. The next morning, Topi and Kazuti went out to hunt, and I tagged along. I was only there to watch and wouldn't fight unless absolutely necessary, but I felt the need to stay active. I noticed that Topi and Kazuti fought more like they did when all three of us were together. As a whole, they were more mobile and rhythmic in battle. It was incredible to see them change up their tactics on the fly with hardly any vocal communication between them. After each fight, I gave some commentary on what I saw. I couldn't exactly tell what could be improved, but I did my best to support their efforts since I was essentially dead weight. We explored the forest more, the two taking out any Celians we came across, until we caught another glimpse of the large Celian again. I noticed something moving in the distance, but it was hidden by shrubs in front of it. It was large enough to shake the trees as it moved past them, but was entirely silent. I tried to get Topi and Kazuti's attention, but they barely missed seeing it. I explained what I saw to them, hoping they would see it if it made another appearance. I pointed at where I saw it, and then a moment later, a tree nearby began shaking violently. We were too far away to hear anything that was happening, only faint echoes of Celian rumbling. It then made an appearance out into the sunny clearing we were looking out across. It was an enormous, circular Celian with 2 arms and, terrifyingly, no face. Its shape warped and deformed as it hovered silently. The only definite weak spot it had was a stiffer, discolored black spot against its translucent, dark green body. "No, it's too large to float. It can't be," Topi muttered. "Too big?" I asked, searching for clarification. "The larger they are, the less they can float. This one is an anomaly," she said. It was significantly larger than any other Celian I had seen up to this point. From our position, it seemed to be about 14 feet tall, and each arm was easily 5 feet long at the forearm. "Save it for another day," Kazuti said, oddly punctual in her delivery. She moved us away from our viewing area of the beast. I was barely able to pull my eyes off it as we moved away. We went directly back to the dojo, despite it being midday, and spoke about what we would do next. We mulled over what to do about the imminent fight we would have with the giant Celian, but we couldn't come to a good solution. Topi kept up her unemotional aura through the discussion, but I could tell she had a little bit of worry in her. Right as we were about to finish talking about what to do, Topi announced what we will do. "Havix, as soon as you are healed, we are going to hunt the Celian. Do you understand?" Topi stated. "Yes, Topi." "Wolverine, you're coming as well." "Yeah, I'll be there." She wasn't angry or frustrated, just determined to get the Celian out of the air. When our conversation finished, I went to the front of the dojo to clear my mind. I stood in the sunlight for a while, the warmth being a nice change from the constant shade of the forest. It was quite pleasing to be out on my own for a while. No thoughts or worries about the two came to me at all. I focused on myself for a while, interrupted by Kazuti tapping me on the shoulder. "Hey, you doing alright?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Good. Here's a Japari bun." I took it and held it to my side. I wasn't hungry at the moment, but I appreciated the gesture. "You know, I'm actually a little scared of the big Celian," Kazuti confessed. "Really?" "Yeah, I fought one like that before. I was with someone like Topi. We only beat it because we were lucky." "Let's get lucky again." She sighed and looked at me bereft of any enthusiasm she was normally full of. I said the wrong thing again. She looked across the open lawn. "I'm scared." "I am too." Kazuti walked back to the dojo, and I stayed in my same position. I had already come to terms with the danger we were in, but I was nowhere near as emotional as Kazuti. I was afraid of what was to come, but letting fear take control seemed pointless. I stood alone for a while to pass the time, then went back to the dojo to see what the two were up to. As I came in, they were going out for another hunting session. I was surprised that they wanted to go out again, despite the danger looming. They assured me they'd be staying near the dojo and staying out of anything too risky. I followed them like I did before, and true to their word, we only had small fights around the dojo's nearby trails. I tried to get in on a few, issuing a few restrained punches and kicks to not disturb my bandages. I couldn't keep up with Topi or Kazuti, but tried to chip in to show them I still wanted to help. I didn't get to do much, as we were out for a very short amount of time. After we finished, we stayed inside until the evening to not attract any unwanted Sellians to us. The next day was quiet. We stayed very close to the dojo and only had small-scale fights. I tried to get involved as much as I could, but tried to keep my actions minimal to make sure I healed properly. Thankfully, by the end of the day, I was ready to take off the bandage. My skin healed nicely, the gash sealed cleanly, and I was ready to hunt again. Our hunting for the day was already finished, so I took the time to train in the dojo to stay in shape. I used the dummy again. This time I didn't have any issues with my skin tearing. My kicks were sturdy, and I felt much better about using them for a fight. Overall, I felt much stronger and even better than I did before my injury. I practiced my old moves and tried new ones for a while. When I finished my training, I watched Topi and Kazuti spar with each other. They had a good match, the both of them playing to their strengths and weaknesses well. Topi managed to overpower Kazuti's balance and pinned her once she made an opening in her defense. When they finished their round, Kazuti invited me to take her place. Topi gave me all the effort she could, but I managed to pin her with a bit of effort. We took a break to get our energy back, and then it was me up against Wolverine. Our fight was much more vertical, Wolverine attempting to uproot my balance and topple me. I took the vertical approach she had and inverted it, attempting to equal out her forces and push her to the ground. It worked for a few moments, keeping our movement neutral, but once I sent an off-center jolt of motion to her, we broke out of our lock and into another. I pushed hard and managed to overpower her balance. I got her on her back, and despite her best efforts to shrimp out of it, I got her pinned. Wolverine had an entirely different fighting style from Topi, being much more in the air rather than planted on the ground. I informed her of what I thought, and commented on how she might be able to change her tactics if things weren't going her way. When we finished discussing, it was time for Topi and I to spar. She put much more energy into this bout, using light blows to my arms and chest to throw me off focus. Right as I was feeling tired, she swept one of my legs, pulled me to the ground, and pinned me to finish the round. She looked as surprised as I was when she pinned me, signs of disbelief coming through. I tried to tell her good job, but she retracted off me before I could. She hadn't had me pinned for hardly 5 seconds. She might have felt embarrassed for me because I didn't beat her and Kazuti was watching, but the reason didn't matter. She placed herself away from me, uneasily staring at me and glancing at Kazuti. I didn't understand what she was feeling or for what reason. We finished sparring afterward and got ready for bed. As Topi was getting under the covers, she asked me if I'd be ready to fight tomorrow. I told her yes. We stayed silent for a moment. Then she asked me what my wound looked like and if I was sure it was fully healed. She seemed like she didn't want me to be better yet, like she wanted to delay the fight with the giant Sellian. I reluctantly pulled up my shirt and showed her where the wound was, the spot healing so well it looked like nothing even happened. She didn't say anything or even acknowledge that I had shown her anything. She turned to her back and shut her eyes. The next morning was like any other, but when it came time to hunt, we knew that today was going to be very difficult. As we walked, Kazuti and I uneasily talked about our strategy for fighting the giant Sellian, while Topi stayed quiet. I tried asking her a question, but she acted like I hadn't said anything to her and only stared back at me. We ventured on silently. We returned to the location we saw the giant Sellian at. The 3 of us went into the open field, crossing it to get to the mangled trees left by the beast. Wolverine heard something as we were getting closer to the spot, Topi perking up as well. There was a sound they could hear, but I couldn't. They inched toward the source of the noise, while I stayed back. From my position, I thought I could see the ending tip of one of the Sellian's arms. My heart started to pick up pace from the suspense we were in. Abruptly, the 2 stopped, and at the same time, the giant Sellian began moving. What I thought was a Sellian's arm went out of my vision, and the trees in front of us began to quiver, the popping and crackling getting louder as it grew nearer. Topi and Kazuti pushed inward toward the woods, rather than baiting the Sellian out to the open field. I followed after them and dumped the bag against a tree. Our fighting area was wide open, trees far enough apart for us to move freely, but also close enough to hinder the Celian's movement. It chased after us, making a rhythmic, fluctuating growling noise as it came closer. Topi made the first strike, using an upward slash to begin the assault. Wolverine took to the left side, attempting to strike its arm to keep it from attacking us right away. I used Wolverine's distracting strafe to land a strong punch near its hardened weak point, missing it by a few inches. The impact caused enough shock that it started an attack in retaliation, using its arms to attempt to bat us away. We dodged the attack, scrambling out of the way of the sweeping strike into new positions. I shouted that I would attack it from the rear, and the two would take the front. I launched a flat kick into the fiend, not making any damage, but alerting it to my position. Before it could turn to face me, Topi made a strong slash into its left arm, pulling attention back to its front. Wolverine then made a strike into its weak spot, damaging it heavily. It grazed her loose jacket, knocking her off balance, but leaving her unharmed. It then threw a punch at Topi, but she sidestepped the attack and used the spear to shred its arm blob as it came toward her. I ran to the front of the Celian and tried to throw another punch at its weak spot, but missed once more. The Celian was left stunned for a few seconds, unable to move. Topi shouted at me to move, and I stepped back. She had a running start at the beast, her spear held down and behind her. She pulled her spear in front of her, and with a heavy footfall, she leapt into the air. Her movement was graceful, the jump perfectly utilizing her weight transfer into the air. She pulled her legs up closer to her body, and on the descent from her jump, used all of her momentum and weight on a powerful slash directly into the Celian's weak spot. Her slash broke the Celian in half, an enormous fracture appearing and expanding from the wound. It fell to the ground suddenly, the whole of it going limp as its green coloration desaturated and turned a sickly, dark algae-like color. Instead of the whole entity bursting into diluted sandstar cubes, it popped, bubbled, and boiled away, the limbs the first to do so. I stepped away from the Celian, but Topi oddly stood in front of it. I grabbed her wrist and led her away from it. We convened around the drop bag, all three of us still with racing hearts and panting to get our air back. I could feel my heart beat in my stomach, it was beating so hard. Topi and Kazudi were in a similar state, Kazudi needing to take a knee to keep from falling over. I noticed that the glow in their eyes from their wild release was starting to fade as they calmed down. Once we regained our composure, we left the fight scene to not attract any more Celians to us. We returned to the open field. A storm cloud overhead made the opening shady. We checked ourselves for injuries, and none of us had any aside from Kazudi's jacket getting a laceration. Without needing any communication between us, we started back to the dojo. On the way back, I lightened our mood, trying to get the others to feel triumphant. "Good work. That wasn't so bad, was it?" I lightheartedly asked.
"It wasn't so bad, I guess. It could have been worse,"
Kazudi responded. Topi didn't respond for a moment, and replied, "We did well. It's good that none of us were hurt." We returned to the dojo and didn't do anything for a while. Now that our goal was complete, it felt like we didn't have anything else to do. At the end of the day, we went out hunting like normal to get ourselves back into our regular habits. Chapter 7. A week passed. Each day, the Celian count growing steadily. We were into our hunting life once more, spending each day hunting for as long as we could. Topi's dedication never wavered. She kept us in our routine as strongly as before. Wolverine continued to tag along with us whenever we met up, and occasionally stayed a night in the dojo. Our lives resumed, the only difference being the growing Celian count. As the Celian count grew, I found that my boxing style wasn't as good as Topi's spear. She could take out several Celians with a wide sweep, however I had to hit each of them individually. In a longer fight, I would get tired, while Topi would be able to keep going. I was doing as much as I could with my current skills, but I needed a change. I asked her if she was willing to teach me how to use a spear. I feel like my boxing strategy isn't working as well as it used to. I'm getting a little overwhelmed out there. Could you teach me how to use your spear sometime? Yes. I don't think I can teach you everything, but I can teach you the basics. Can't wait to start. Even if I'm not that good at it, I'd still like to know how you do what you do. She stood up and retrieved a spear from her collection. It had a small chip on the smaller end, and the sharpening was quite dull. She observed it, checking it for things I couldn't discern. She brought it to me and placed it in my hands. "You will be using this spear. This was my previous spear. It served me well. But before you can use that one..." She went to retrieve something else and returned with a wooden pole, slightly curved at one end. "You will train with this first." "Can't wait. What's the first lesson?" Topi guided me through the positions, the way I should stand, and the poses I should form. She was patient with me throughout the process and communicated with me effectively. I noticed that she was oddly sensitive about touching me, despite the numerous sparring matches we've had. She taught me the fundamentals on the first day, and from there, taught me the basics of spear handling. Within a few days of training, I was ready to fight a Cillian. We went out to hunt, but this time I took Topi's spear that she lent me. We searched for a single Cillian, trying to sneak up on it so I could attack it without having to deal with others following after it. We found a single circular Cillian in an almost perfect location, floating alone and unaware of us. When I saw it, I was ready to spring at it and attack immediately, but Topi held me back. "Do you have a plan made?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm gonna slash it." "Are you going to approach it, or are you going to draw it to you?" "I don't know." "Do you have a plan made?" "Oh, I see what you mean." "You can't go into a battle without a plan. Don't attack without thinking." "Okay, I understand. You must always trust your senses. They're the only thing you can rely on. Do not distrust yourself." "Alright, I'm ready." I walked out toward the Cillian and readied my spear like how we'd practiced. Using a little bit of motion, I performed a strike onto the Cillian, the sharp edge assisting in the blow. The strike felt good, feeling the same as the other slashes I practiced. The Cillian flew back, but it was not defeated yet. I advanced and used a flat swipe to cut the foe in half, finishing it off. It dissolved away on the ground instead of popping into diluted sandstar cubes. When it was over, Topi congratulated me for taking down my first Cillian with a spear. She didn't show her pride, but I knew it was there. She was happy with how I handled the single Cillian, but my lack of a battle plan was concerning to her. It was mostly a difference in strategy, rolling with the punches versus planning and moving, but I understood her concern. I thanked her for teaching me how to use a spear, which seemed to get through to her. "Topi, thank you for teaching me how to use a spear. I admire how skilled you are, and you being willing to share a little bit of that with me means a lot. Being able to fight like you do along with you is amazing. I think this is going to bring us together, make us closer with each other." "Yes, it may. Thank you for your gratitude." More days passed, and I became more proficient with spear handling as the days went on. Topi's training came to me well, and she remarked that I was learning very quickly. I still hunted primarily with my fists, but sometimes I would try out using a spear when the Cillian population was low. Like my prediction, Topi and I grew closer. She became slightly more comfortable with touching me, not hesitating as much before trying to correct my pose or stance, and being more relaxed around me. When we weren't training, she would speak more kindly, be less stiff, and generally more accepting around me. It was a gradual change, but I noticed it happening. We continued our hunt-train-hunt schedule without any issues. On a cloudy day, shortly after a rainstorm, we went out to hunt like usual. The ground was slippery, but we managed to fight without being tripped up by the wet conditions. I started off using a spear, trying out a new technique I had recently learned. Topi let me lead the fight like she always did, and cleaned up after me. As the fight progressed, more Cillians came to attack, overwhelming my spear ability. I returned back to my unarmed style that I was used to, and took on the Cillian wave like usual. I wasn't able to switch my mindset from spear to fists quick enough, which led to me making some mistakes. A few of the Cillians managed to slip between us, and I took care of them before they got behind us. A particularly speedy Cillian caught my attention as it moved between us. I tried throwing a punch at it, but missed. Topi had also noticed it getting past us, and positioned herself much, much closer to me. The combination of a missed attack and her moving closer to me led to a very solid strike landing in her stomach. Before the hit landed, I knew I had made a grave mistake. I could only watch as my energy transferred where I didn't want it to be. On contact, she was immediately taken out of the fight, entirely immobilizing her from the single strike. Once I regained control over the attack, I moved away from her as far as I could, the Sellians forgetting about her and coming to me. I retrieved my spear and took care of the horde as quickly as I could. I used every wide slash I knew to destroy their forces. I didn't even think about my movements. I focused solely on getting back to Topi as quickly as I could. I found her convulsing in pain, the source coming from where the hit landed. I did my best to calm her down, to stop her writhing around. "Topi, I'm so sorry. Relax. Relax, please," I pleaded with her. She opened her eyes enough to see me and stopped convulsing so violently. She was groaning with labored breaths. "Relax. Lay flat. You'll be okay." She tried to follow my instructions, albeit reluctantly due to the pain. As she moved, she stared at me with her pained eyes, looking to me for comfort. I felt disgusted that I did this to her, but I knew I could make it better as well. Once I got her to lie fully flat, her pain only spiked when her stomach was agitated. I looked for what I could use to help her in the drop bag, but all of her supplies were for cut and slash wounds. I stayed by her side, guiding her through the pain. Minutes passed, and her pain had diminished by a little. The rain from earlier was about to return, and we needed to move away from the area. Through a very slow process, I guided her up to a sitting position, then kneeling, then standing. She grimaced and whimpered on the way up, her pain levels decreasing the further she went. She was weak on her feet, but as I held her up, she gained her strength back. It was a slow process, but after some stretching, she was able to walk to the dojo. She kept staring at me on the way back. It was a look of mild shock, her eyes wide, face relaxed, her topi ears angled at me, and a general look of empty tenseness. She stared at me, looking for comfort, looking for me to help her through the pain I had given her. I had guilt for what I had done, but I knew that what had happened was unavoidable and simply a fighting incident. When we got back to the dojo, I checked her bruise. It was still mostly red, but a little part of it was purple already, the purple developing unusually quickly. I let her sleep for a while, considering leaving to go hunt solo, but I decided to stay by her in case she needed help. Wolverine came to the dojo and discovered the situation we were in. Topi was still asleep when she arrived, so she spoke with me for a while. I couldn't say much, aside from retelling the events and apologizing for what happened. Wolverine reassured me that everything would be fine, and this incident was relatively minor. I felt so strange knowing that what I did caused pain to someone I care about, but I also didn't do anything wrong. I understood how Topi felt when she hurt me, but instead of sorrow, I felt numb. Wolverine offered to take me on a walk to clear my mind, but I declined since I wanted to stay by Topi's side. Through the course of the evening, Wolverine talked to me about Topi and I. She wanted to know how close we were, how things were between us. I started off telling her that things were the same as always, and that we were still just friends. After a little thinking and remembering small things she did, I started to realize that she was growing closer to me. The way she looked at me after our training together, how she spoke to me, and even how she sat around me was different. She was more relaxed, more understanding of me. I realized that she was so forgiving to me because she cared about me.
You two sound pretty close now,
Wolverine giggled.
Why don't you get a little closer?
I couldn't imagine how we could get closer. I felt like I was as close to her as possible. It was Topi that was still restrained, and she was the one that was warming up to me. I let her be more open with me by taking interest in her passion, by wanting to be with her for who she is. Before we went to sleep, I spoke to Topi to see if what I realized was correct. "Hey, Topi. How you doing, buddy?" "Better. I'll be okay. Thank you for asking. I just wanted to say thank you again for teaching me how to use a spear. It means a lot." She stayed silent for a moment. "I'm glad you were able to follow my ways." I didn't have anything else to say, and she was getting sleepy. Before I got too sleepy, I said one last thing to her. "I'll be here for you, Topi. I'll be here." She was asleep. Topi didn't go out to hunt the next day. Kazuri and I went out while she recovered, spending a lot of her time stretching in the dojo. Her bruise was fully purple at midday, healing much quicker than I thought possible. By the next day, it was red and any discomfort had dissipated. Once she was fully healed, we resumed hunting as usual, sometimes taking a day off to train. Our fights grew longer, the Sellians requiring more time to defeat them. It seemed that they were growing resistant to us, in a way. Our strength and endurance grew with the increased challenges, our teamwork growing as well. During this time, our lives seemed stable. Each day would be largely the same, our actions predictable, with a few special trips when needed. I enjoyed the fact that we had some sort of security in the middle of the danger, having something to consider normal. Each day, we woke up together, knowing that we would be there for each other. We operated on understanding, not needing to discuss decisions in detail or argue, and knowing that what we were doing was best for us. Wolverine became much more frequent of a visitor, sometimes staying in the dojo with us for several days. The three of us together made an incredible team, each of us taking care of each other as best as we could. I tried discussing with Topi to make sure things were okay with us. I would ask her about how she was feeling about us, what she was thinking when we weren't hunting, and anything else that came to mind. She tried to answer as best as she could, but sometimes her emotionlessness would get in the way, preventing her from answering. She still didn't want to concern herself with emotions or feeling yet, wanting to focus herself purely on hunting and making sure we were okay. The more I tried speaking with her, the more she spoke with me, sometimes asking if I needed anything, how I was feeling, and things I would ask her. Gradually, she became more comfortable about initiating conversations. On an easy day where I was feeling quite optimistic, I asked Topi about her and I living together. Things had been great between us, and I just wanted to know her thoughts about us. I asked, "What do you think about us living together? I don't think I've asked you about it recently. I just want to know if there's anything you want to say or tell me." "Us living together? Well, there aren't any issues I can think of. I believe everything is okay. Is there anything that you would like to say? Anything bothering you?" "Nothing's wrong. Just tell me if something is, though." She gave me a reassuring nod, and we continued walking. "I don't think of you as a roommate," Topi began after a while of walking. "I don't think you're just a roommate. You're more than that. I don't know what to consider us. The best I can think of is companion. We do much more than share a home, and friend is limited." "I see. Thanks for telling me that." We continued hunting like normal, finishing off the day with Kazuri assisting us in battle. She came back to the dojo with us, spending the night in the spare room like she had many times before. As the day turned to evening, we had dinner together, a feeling of camaraderie in the air. Most everything was the same as always, but that day felt special. The next day, in the middle of hunting, Kazuri left. She didn't return for nearly a month. The only warning that she was about to depart was the usual "bye-bye" from her. She didn't tell us where she was going, or for what reason. I grew worried for her when she didn't return after a week, wondering if she had ventured too far or gotten stuck somewhere. I wished that she was okay, which was the only thing I could do until her return. While Kazuri was gone, our days became stale. Our fights became easier, much more routine, and our lives repetitive. Everything was the same as before, but the excitement of normality was over, and now we were just going through the motions. Things would pick up with the occasional large-scale battle, but most days lacked luster. We kept each other going, doing what we were good at to help each other through each day. The only major event of interest was when Topi cut me with a spear. It was a small cut, not large enough to require time off from hunting. It was an overall insignificant injury, but the source of it was what hurt the most. A few days before Kazuri's return, Topi and I were out hunting as usual. We just finished a group of Sellians, a step up in difficulty from normal. As we made sure the area was clear, an idea came to me. I wanted to say "good job" to her, but in a more meaningful way, since I don't say it so much. I got in front of her, asked her to put her spear down, and hugged her. She didn't know what to do with the contact I was giving her. She put her arms out, hoping I would let go. I held on to her, hoping she would hug me back. It took her a little while, but she loosened up and placed her hands on my back. Little by little, she got more into the hug the more I held her, finally squeezing me back and relaxing. We hugged for a very long time, her needing the embrace much more than I did. What I intended to be a show of gratitude turned into something much more for her. I let go and Topi loosened her hold on me. When we got back home to the dojo, Topi thanked me for the hug. Chapter 8. Kazuri's return brought an end to the stale period. Her return didn't bring more difficult times or exciting days. All of us being together simply made us feel more connected. She found us while we were out hunting, serendipitously crossing paths.
Oh, am I glad to see you two. Sorry for skipping out on ya. I had somewhere I needed to be.
Wolverine greeted us. I would like to hear about your journey, Topi said.
I, went to the Snowy Mountains area. I didn't see anyone the whole time.
Surprised, I said. All the way out there on foot? That must have taken ages.
It didn't take me long. I moved pretty fast. I got pretty lonely out there, though. I thought I would see someone on the way there or on the way back, but nope.
She paused and searched for what to talk about next.
I left so suddenly because I felt this pull to go there. I don't know what it was. I just felt like I should be in the snow for a while. I hope everything was okay while I was gone.
No problems here. I'm glad you're okay, I answered.
Oh, here's something for you. I tore one of my gloves when I was out, and now I have an extra pair of gloves. You can have these. They might fit you well.
Thank you. Now I won't have to borrow Topi's gloves. I know what I can do with these. Her gloves had a few tears at the top of them. I planned on cutting them shorter to make them simple fingerless gloves without any extra length. We resumed hunting together to continue our meeting. After our hunt, all three of us had lunch together for the first time in a while. We had our usual meal, but all of us being together again was a relief. Before we went out to hunt again, Kazuri pulled me aside to speak to me privately.
Thank you for being Topi's friend. You've helped her so much. She's so different now. You've let her grow to be something much more than before. Thank you.
No problem, Wolverine. I'm just doing what I can for her. I considered explaining more about Topi and I, but decided on saving the conversation for later. Kazuri ended our short exchange with,
Okay, enough of the sappy talk. Let's get back to it.
We finished our midday break and went back to our hunt like usual. Kazuri found the easier Celians boring to fight, and so did we. We concluded our hunt early to give ourselves extra time at home. We mostly just lounged around together, sharing each other's company. We went out to the open clearing to watch the sunset, something we hadn't done in a while. I had a dream that night. I was battling Celians alone using a spear. I fought for a very long time, never losing my stamina. I envisioned each attack before I executed it, precisely how Topi taught me. Once I finished the last Celian, I noticed that I was wearing Topi's shirt and gloves with my regular pants and shoes. I found it strange that I was wearing her clothes, but shrugged it aside. Wolverine then came to congratulate me, but as soon as I saw her, I noticed that she was visibly injured in many spots. She was bruised, cut, and had a few more scars on her face. Her voice was also slightly raspy. Topi came shortly afterward to greet me. She was in a similar state to Kazuri, visibly battered and walking with a slight limp. My mind raced to the worst possible situation, wondering if I had done that to them somehow. They sensed my fear and asked if I was okay. I asked what happened to them, and they said I had saved them. I didn't understand how I saved them, but I started feeling immense guilt over the last battle and not completing it fast enough. They told me that they were fine, and I didn't do anything to them. Nevertheless, my stomach filled with a swelling feeling of guilt. Their proximity to me made my guilt worse, and being away from them wouldn't make it better. My head started to spin with negative emotions, and I felt sick. The dream ended with them trying to console me, their battered state reminding me I could have done more. I awoke in the early morning with a jolt. The dream was so confounding. All of it had strong emotion in it, but none of it seemed to have meaning. Still worried about Dream Topi's state, I gently moved the blanket away from her face to see if the real Topi had any injuries. She was the same as always, sleeping soundly and unharmed. I nearly got up to check on Kazuti, but remembered that what happened was just a dream. I laid back down and went back to sleep. Our next few days were easy and slow. We decided to slow our pace for hunting since the Cellian count had diminished so much. Topi remarked that the low season for Cellians had started, and that we would come across very few from then on. I started using a spear more often to train my skills. As time passed, I started feeling more dedicated to Cellian hunting. I didn't feel like it was my purpose, but I understood how Topi felt at a personal level. On an otherwise unremarkable hunt, I tried team fighting with Topi and Kazuti. I was using a spear, which complicated things a bit. In addition, my spear had dulled, requiring significantly more force per swing. Our fight was going well, keeping a slow pace so we wouldn't tire ourselves out over weak Cellians. Kazuti was quite feisty, pushing toward the group of fiends faster than Topi and I were prepared for. One slipped past Kazuti, and I used an exceptionally strong slash to kill it. My slash successfully broke the Cellian in half, but the follow-through carried a massive amount of energy in it. Topi was far enough away to avoid the slash, or so I thought until I heard a pained exclamation come from her. I looked to see what happened and found her grabbing at an open wound on her thigh, blood coming from it quickly. I immediately went to Topi's aid while Kazuti took care of the rest of the Cellians. I was unsure about what to do. The wound at an awkward angle, and none of our supplies seemed to be the right thing to use. The wound itself was jagged and looked more like the spear had ripped through her skin. The tip of the spear even had cloth from her leggings, skin, and blood on it. I ended up packing the open wound and wrapping it with gauze to stop the bleeding. With pressure and time, the bleeding stopped, and she was able to walk back home. I didn't have to apologize to her profusely or talk over what happened with her. We mutually understood what had happened. I still made sure to tell her that hurting her is the very last thing I want to do, and I had done it again. I wanted it to stop happening, even if it was an accident. She felt the same way, but realistically, there was no way to prevent these things. Over the next few days, she healed completely, not even a scar left over. My memory of her blood on my spear was still fresh, watching it spread in my mind. Every time we had injured each other replayed, remembering the pain we needlessly inflicted on each other. I couldn't express how it made me feel. We spotted another large Cellian while out on a hunt. It was a purple, bipedal, arch-shaped Cellian with one large eye at its center. At first, Kazuti and Topi wanted to retreat and fight it later, but I pushed them to attack it when we saw it. I was more assertive than I had been before, firmly taking my position on attacking it now. Leaving it for later would only let it develop into a bigger problem. We discussed what to do first, then pushed toward the giant foe. I led them in the battle, beginning the attack with a kick to the Cellian's back, inflicting more damage than expected. It turned around and locked onto me as its primary target. I moved away from it, and it stepped toward me, thundering with each footfall. Topi made a piercing strike into its front, but it didn't pay her attack any attention. It continued to pursue me, attempting to box out Topi and Kazuti. It formed a thick, tentacle-like appendage to swipe at me, but I dodged its attack. Kazuti unleashed a flurry of strikes into it, weakening it by wearing away at its Cellium body. It stepped backwards, doing what appeared to be a retreat to get away from Kazuti's attacks. I launched myself at it, landing a strong blow to its center, damaging it heavily. It launched a newly formed appendage into my chest, and it used the rest of the energy from the attack to hit Topi and Kazuti. The attack recoiled me back a few feet, leaving me winded. Once I regained my composure, it felt like time stopped. In a few milliseconds, every single fiber of my being began to resonate. My mind flushed out any thoughts, feelings, emotions, pain responses, and replaced everything with anger. Anger and rage became me. Within this frozen time, I could see my friends, my allies, tossed to the ground. A red haze developed over everything. Time unfroze, and the red mist stayed. I let my anger develop. My heart rate surged. Breaths became closer to snarls, and movements unconscious. Guided by anger for what the Cellian had done to us, I launched myself at it with an unending blaze of power. I sprinted at it, my body feeling light from how fast I was moving. I unleashed a powerful punch into it, following it with another attack of the same magnitude. I could feel the shockwave of power reverberate back into me with attack, my body feeling a confirmation of the hit. The flurry of hits disabled the Cellion, leaving it open for me to kill it. I stepped in front of its eye, and with one monstrous thrust, shattered its eye. My fist punctured deep into the Cellion, and as the attack reached the end of its travel, I launched another strike into it. The Cellion was killed on the first strike, however I continued to attack. My anger coursed through me stronger than it ever had before, and the red mist signed no signs of dispersing. I continued blasting away the now dead corpse. I knew it was dead, but the barrier of red mist prevented me from stopping my attacks. Kazuri shouted at me to stop, begging me to get away from it, but the barrier of red mist prevented her cries from registering with me. I only finished when my anger decided that I could stop. I continued to snarl and grunt after I finished. The mist would not dissipate. I couldn't feel my hands up to my wrists, but they were still clenched harder than they ever had been before. My muscles still burned for another flurry of punches, but I was lacking a target. My anger levels slowly started to diminish, and I regained control over myself little by little. It took several minutes for me to become verbal again. I moved away from the Cellion's dissolving body and walked toward Topi and Kazuri. Hey, are you okay? I didn't notice it immediately, but as I came closer to them, they moved away from me. They were afraid of me. We're okay. What happened to you? Red mist, I started. I pointed at my eyes, trying to show the physical response of red mist. Are my eyes bloodshot? Are they red? They're really red. Are you okay? Kazuri asked. That's red mist. When you get so angry, so heated that the world gets a red fog, and you stop thinking, your whole body focuses on killing. Topi pondered. Is that your wild release? This red mist? No, I've been through this before. It's not a wild release at all. Please get some rest. You don't know what happened to you, Kazuri pleaded. I followed her request. My heart rate gradually slowed. The mist dissipated, and all anger left my body. It slowly seeped out of me, my mind and sense returning to normal. Despite wearing gloves, I was still left with blisters on my knuckles and a burn on my wrist from the Cellion. I felt weaker and weaker as time progressed, needing to lie down to fully relax. When I felt good enough to speak again, I asked Topi about what had happened from her perspective. Well, we were hit by the Cellion after you were, so we didn't see you get up. You charged at it. Something visibly was different about you. I tried to help you in the fight, but there was nothing I could do. You kept hammering and hammering. I don't think I've ever seen you fight that hard before. Then you hit it straight in its eye. Your arm went really, really far into it, and Kazuri noticed it too. We were worried that you would be sucked into it if it had any life left in it. Then you kept punching it. You didn't stop. Kazuri shouted at you to stop, and you didn't. She got a few feet away from you, screaming at you, and you didn't. I almost pulled you away, but I knew something was wrong with you. Were you afraid of me? I think I saw you step away from me when I was over. Topi took a deep breath in and continued. We got away from you, then you stopped fighting. You stood over the Cellion's body, grunting and panting for a while. We didn't know what to do, so we waited for you to come to us. When you came to us, and I saw your red eyes, yes, I was afraid of you. I didn't know if you were going to do anything to us out of confusion or otherwise. You were so different. I'm sorry, Topi. I didn't mean to scare you. I lost control. I understand. It's just like using your wild release for the first time. Can we go home soon? I'm good enough to walk now. Our walk home was slow. It felt like I was recalibrating my body, taking a little bit to get into myself. I kept thinking about what I felt and thought under the effects of red mist, and how I couldn't stop it. I worried that I would lose control like that again when being fully conscious next time. You doing okay, bud? Kazuri asked me. Yeah, I'm fine. Back to normal. The red mist event faded into the backs of our minds. I was weakened for the rest of the day, able to move and take care of things, but not strong enough to fight. I tried taking a nap to regain my strength, but that only succeeded in making me sleepy. I was disappointed that my day was soured, but forgot about all of the issues when night came. After my body's recalibration, I felt much stronger and faster. I could process and predict movements even better than before, being fast enough to make everything else feel slow. It was like I was in a flow state, but more awake. The feeling lasted for about a week, and then faded later on. Our teamwork and strength as a group was at its strongest, and we took down a few large Sellians easily. We sustained a few minor injuries inflicted by Sellians, but we were able to continue hunting unhindered. It rained often during this time. It made hunting more difficult, but we persevered through the adversity. The trails became muddier and travel slower. We would stay inside on extra rainy days, leaving us with plenty of time to train. We mostly sparred and practiced with our spears to stay active. The time we spent together was important to me, quality time spent without any stress or fears. The near-daily rain stopped, and we continued hunting. Our training proved to be time well spent, as we hadn't lost any proficiency. I was happy to be back on the hunt again, eager to fight the next group of Sellians. Kazuri amped me up before some of the fights, her playful side coming out. Our fights felt rhythmic, each movement made in time with an unheard tempo. It was an ethereal effect to be under, a perfect flow shared between us with understood coordination. Problems arose when the tempo was broken. A Sellian got out of our control and required Kazuri to attack it. She tried to rejoin our formation, but couldn't get back into tempo. The loss of us moving together caused us to fight as individuals, our sync lost. I tried to keep the same speed, but lost any sort of composure as the fight progressed. I rushed through the fight, trying to end it quickly to stop the feeling of the broken rhythm. My rush led me to attack a Sellian far too soon, throwing a punch at what I thought was a brown Sellian. It turned out to be Topi's arm. I didn't realize I had hit her until the fight was over, when I found her holding her arm in pain. I tried to help her as best as I could, apologizing the whole time. I explained why that happened, but it felt like an excuse to me. My frantic state of mind turned into frustration at myself, growing unreasonably angry at myself for what I did. Frustration, anger, and confusion blended together to make bad thoughts worse. We went back home, and I finally got time to cool off. Now with everything I did to her in the past, I started to feel guilty about how I felt. I understood that getting mad at myself wasn't helping, and that being this state was making me feel worse than Topi. I calmed myself down and started to get rational thought back. All I could focus on was preventing myself from hurting her again. At that moment, it was the only thing I wanted in the world. I knew that simple strategy changes weren't enough, and splitting up our hunts would cause more pain from Sellians. The only thing I could think of that would really work is... Topi, I've been thinking. We really need to stop hurting each other. Yes, I understand. I really mean it, Topi. This has to stop. One of these times I'm gonna hurt you and it won't go away. She sighed. I know. That is the risk that we take. We're gonna end up killing each other. In a fit of residual anger, I said, Topi, I'll leave you if it means I can stop hurting you. Quietly, she responded. What? Leave? Why? I want the best for you, and this is what we'll have to do, right? Is there really another way to make sure we won't hurt each other that will work? Topi looked back at me, wordlessly communicating that she had thought of this before. I resumed. I guess we'll need more time to think about this. Topi, we have to stop hurting each other. I understand. After our conversation, I had an enormous feeling of, what have I done, looming over me. I sat within the feeling, letting the sensation wash over me fully. I remembered all of the things I had done to her, the memories worn like a path with deep ruts. I remembered all the things she had done to me, the memories not so fond as I had forgiven and forgot long ago. Topi walked over to me and said a very simple line to me. We don't have to.